The brave cowboy risked everything to protect an Apache grandmother. Her reward changed his life. The desert wind moved slowly across the wide-open land as Daniel guided his horse along a dusty trail that stretched far beyond the horizon. The evening sun was low, casting long shadows across dry grass and scattered rocks. He had spent the entire day checking fences and moving cattle, and his body felt tired, but his mind remained calm. Daniel preferred the quiet of open spaces. Out here there were no crowds, no noise, only the steady rhythm of nature and the soft sound of hooves pressing into the earth. He lived a simple life on a small ranch near a remote town where people mostly kept to themselves. The town had old buildings, a single grocery store, and a cafe where locals gathered each morning. Daniel rarely joined them. He preferred silence and routine. Years ago, life had taken unexpected turns that taught him to rely on himself more than anyone else. Since then, he had chosen distance over connection, believing it made life easier. As he rode back toward home, a faint movement near the roadside caught his attention. At first, he thought it might be an animal, but as he moved closer, he saw an elderly woman walking slowly, carrying several heavy bundles. She paused often, adjusting the weight and catching her breath. The road was long and empty, and the sun was beginning to disappear behind distant hills. Daniel slowed his horse and stopped beside her. "Ma'am, are you all right?" he asked gently. The woman looked up. Her face showed deep lines shaped by years of experience, but her eyes were strong and calm. She nodded slowly. "I will manage," she replied softly, though her tired posture suggested otherwise. Daniel noticed her traditional clothing and realized she was Apache. He had grown up near communities where indigenous traditions were respected, though he never had many personal conversations with elders. Something about her presence felt steady and dignified. "You don't need to walk all this way alone," he said after a moment. "I can help you carry those." She hesitated at first, as if measuring his intentions. After a quiet pause, she handed him one of the bundles. "Thank you," she said. "My name is Ayanna." "Daniel," he replied. They walked together for a short distance, but it quickly became clear that the journey ahead was long. Daniel suggested giving her a ride. After some thought, she agreed, and he guided her toward his truck parked nearby. As they drove along narrow dirt roads, the silence between them felt comfortable rather than awkward. Ayanna explained that she lived alone on family land passed down through generations. Her voice carried pride, but also concern. She mentioned that people had been visiting recently, asking questions about the property and suggesting she sell it. Daniel listened carefully. The way she described these visitors made him uneasy. "They say it will be easier for me," she said quietly, looking out the window. "But they do not understand what this land means." Daniel nodded, though he did not yet fully understand. He had grown up believing land was something to protect, something tied to identity. Even without knowing her story completely, he sensed its importance. When they arrived, he noticed the property sat far from other homes. The small house looked sturdy but worn, surrounded by desert plants and old wooden fences. Tire tracks marked the ground near the entrance, fresher than the others. Daniel felt a subtle tension in the air. He helped carry her bundles inside. The house was simple but filled with meaningful objects, handmade crafts, photographs, and items that reflected history and culture. Ayanna thanked him again, offering tea as a gesture of gratitude. He almost declined out of habit, but something encouraged him to stay. They sat quietly at a small table. Ayanna spoke slowly, telling him about her family and how the land held memories of ceremonies and stories passed through generations. Daniel listened more than he spoke, finding comfort in her calm tone. For the first time in a long while, he felt connected to another person without pressure or expectation. Before leaving, Daniel noticed the gate outside hanging loosely from one hinge. Without thinking, he grabbed tools from his truck and began repairing it. The work felt natural, almost automatic. Ayanna watched silently for a while, then smiled gently. "You fix things," she said. "Just small things," he replied. "Sometimes small things matter most," she said softly. Her words stayed with him. As he drove back toward his ranch, the sky darkened, filled with stars that stretched endlessly across the night. He thought about her situation and the stranger she mentioned. He wondered why someone would pressure an elderly woman to give up land that clearly meant so much to her. The next morning, Daniel found himself thinking about her again while feeding horses. He tried to push the thoughts away, telling himself it was none of his business. Yet the image of her walking alone under the setting sun kept returning to his mind. By afternoon, he made a decision without fully realizing it. He packed extra supplies and drove back to check on her. Ayana greeted him with quiet warmth, as if she had expected his return. He helped repair sections of fencing that had been damaged. While working, he noticed cuts in the wire that did not look accidental. Someone had intentionally weakened the barrier. The realization made him uneasy. "Have you reported this?" he asked. She shook her head gently. "Sometimes people listen slowly," she said, suggesting that past attempts to seek help had not brought quick results. Daniel felt frustration rise inside him. He had always avoided involvement in other people's conflicts. Yet standing there, he felt responsible in a way he could not explain. Days passed, and he continued visiting, each time finding more reasons to stay longer. He brought groceries, fixed broken tools, and helped clear debris from the yard. Ayana shared stories about nature, teaching him how to notice subtle signs in the wind and sky. Their conversations were simple but meaningful. One evening, while they sat outside watching the sunset, a distant vehicle approached slowly along the dirt road. Dust rose behind it, creating a cloud that glowed in the orange light. The truck stopped near the gate. Two men stepped out, dressed neatly but carrying an air of confidence that felt uncomfortable. Daniel stood quietly beside Ayana as they approached. The men greeted her politely but quickly began discussing offers and opportunities, speaking as if decisions had already been made. Ayana responded calmly but firmly, saying she had no interest in selling. The men glanced at Daniel, assessing him. Their smiles remained polite, but their tone shifted slightly, suggesting pressure hidden beneath friendly words. After a few minutes, they returned to their truck and drove away, leaving behind an uneasy silence. Daniel watched the dust settle, sensing that this was only the beginning of something larger.
"Are you afraid?" he asked gently. Ayana looked at the horizon before answering.
"Fear is natural," she said. "But what matters is standing firm." Her calm strength surprised him. Despite her age and the pressure she faced, she remained steady. That night, as Daniel drove home, he realized something had changed inside him. He no longer saw himself as just a passerby who helped once. He felt connected to her story and responsible for her safety. The quiet life he had built suddenly felt different, as if a new purpose had entered without warning. He did not know yet how far this path would take him, or how much he would risk. All he knew was that stopping on that roadside had set something in motion, and walking away now felt impossible. The desert was quiet, but he could feel the weight of what had begun. He thought about Ayana and her land. He had always kept to himself, focusing on his ranch and his daily routines. Helping her had started as a small gesture, but now he realized it meant more. There was a problem growing, one that could not be ignored. He rode his horse toward her property, the cool wind brushing against his face. The sky was painted in soft shades of pink and orange, and the scent of dry earth and sage filled the air. As he approached, he noticed that Ayana was already outside, checking fences and preparing water for the animals she kept near the house. Even at her age, she moved with determination and care. "Good morning, Daniel," she said softly, noticing him riding up. Her voice had a calm strength that seemed to carry through the warm morning air. "Morning, Ayana." "I brought some supplies," he replied, lifting bags filled with groceries, tools, and fresh water. She smiled and gestured for him to set them down inside. They worked together to repair more sections of fencing. Daniel had learned that the fences were not just for keeping animals in or out. They were part of what kept her land safe from intruders. Every broken section he fixed felt like a small victory, though he knew it might only be temporary. As they worked, Ayana spoke about the land's history. She told stories of her ancestors, of the traditions that had been practiced on this land for centuries. and of the ceremonies that connected her family to nature. Daniel listened closely. He had grown up near these lands, but hearing the stories from someone who had lived them made the history real. It was no longer just land, it was a living memory. "You understand," she said at one point, pausing to look at him, "that this place is not just soil and water. It carries the spirit of those who came before us. Protecting it is our responsibility." Daniel nodded quietly. He had always respected nature, but her words made him see his role differently. Protecting her home was more than a favor. It was about respect, tradition, and justice. Later that day, as the sun climbed high in the sky, Daniel noticed fresh tire tracks near the fence. They were not ordinary tracks. Someone had driven here recently with intent. He felt a cold knot in his stomach. These were the same strangers who had come before, the ones trying to pressure Ayanna to give up her land. "They're back," he said quietly, pointing toward the tracks. Ayanna looked at the ground, then at him.
"They think age makes me weak," she said, "but I have lived long enough to know the truth." Her words were calm, but there was fire in her eyes.
Daniel realized that this was not going to be simple. These men would not stop until they either forced her to sell or someone stood in their way. He had a choice: stay uninvolved or take a step further than he ever had before. He decided he could not turn away. Over the next few days, Daniel began checking in regularly. He brought more supplies and helped with chores that were becoming increasingly difficult for Ayanna to manage alone. He repaired gates, reinforced doors, and mended fences that had been tampered with. Every time he saw new signs of interference, he felt the weight of responsibility grow heavier. One evening, as the sun dipped behind distant hills, Ayanna invited him to sit and rest on the porch. They watched the sky change colors together. She spoke quietly, telling him more about her life, about the friends she had lost, the family she had cherished, and the pride she felt in keeping the land safe. Daniel listened, feeling a connection he had not expected. "You have a good heart, Daniel," she said, "but courage is tested not when everything is calm, but when the world seems against you." He understood now that helping her was not just about fixing fences. It was about standing firm, no matter the cost. As night fell, Daniel left her property and returned to his ranch. The desert was silent, except for the distant calls of owls. He thought about what Ayanna had said and the signs of trouble he had seen. Sleep came slowly that night. His mind replayed the tire tracks, the broken fences, and the quiet determination in Ayanna's eyes. The next morning, Daniel prepared for another visit. He brought more tools, extra supplies, and even a few items to help make her home more secure. As he arrived, he noticed signs of recent activity: footprints near the barn, slight damage to a side gate, and scattered debris that suggested someone had been inside. He frowned. The intruders were becoming bolder. Ayanna greeted him with a calm smile, though Daniel could see a hint of worry beneath it. "They are impatient," she said softly. Daniel nodded. "We need to be ready," he replied. "I can help you document everything." "If it comes to that, we will have proof." Together they began making notes, taking photos of damage, and marking locations of tire tracks. Daniel felt a sense of purpose he had not experienced before. Every small action he took felt meaningful, as if each repair, each observation, was part of a larger effort to protect not just Ayanna's home, but her family's history. During the days that followed, Daniel continued his work. He reinforced fences, checked locks, and kept watch for strangers. He also began teaching Ayanna small ways to stay safe without fear, showing her how to identify unusual signs around the property and how to secure her home more effectively. Despite the tension, there were moments of quiet connection. They shared meals, discussed stories from their pasts, and even laughed quietly at small mistakes or funny moments during work. These moments reminded Daniel that courage and duty did not always have to be serious. They could exist alongside trust and companionship. One afternoon, while fixing a gate near the edge of the property, Daniel noticed shadows moving between the trees. A group of men had returned, attempting to intimidate Ayanna again. Daniel stepped forward calmly. positioning himself between the intruders and her home. "Leave now," he said firmly. "She is not selling, and you are not welcome here." The men exchanged glances, then left without further confrontation. Daniel knew this was only a temporary reprieve, but it reinforced his belief that standing firm could make a difference. As the sun set, Ayanna placed a hand on his shoulder. "You have courage," she said. "Not the kind that fights, but the kind that protects. That is rare." Daniel felt a deep sense of resolve. He had come to her property as a passerby, but now he realized he could not leave. The quiet life he had built would have to wait. Standing with Ayanna had become part of who he was. Days turned into weeks, and Daniel continued to support her. He helped maintain the land, organized simple defenses, and provided company that eased her loneliness. Each day the sense of partnership grew stronger, and he felt a bond forming that went beyond simple assistance. The strangers continued to make appearances, but Daniel and Ayanna were prepared. Their combined efforts, along with careful documentation and calm resolve, began to turn the tide. Those who thought the land would be easy to take started to face the reality that Ayanna was not alone, and neither was her home. One evening, as Daniel prepared to leave, Ayanna handed him a small bundle of dried herbs. "For protection," she said, her eyes meeting his, "and for courage. You will need both." Daniel accepted it quietly, feeling the weight of her trust. He realized that the days ahead would test him in ways he could not yet imagine. But he also knew that standing by Ayanna was the right choice. Courage, he understood now, was not something you chose when convenient. It was something you carried with you even when the path was uncertain. That night, as he rode back toward his ranch, the stars stretched endlessly above. Daniel felt a mixture of tension and hope. The world was changing, and challenges were coming, but for the first time in years, he understood that his actions mattered, and standing with Ayanna, he was ready for whatever came next. Daniel woke early again, the desert air crisp and still. The morning sun had not yet broken the horizon, but he was already on his horse, heading toward Ayanna's land. Over the past weeks he had come to understand the rhythm of her life, and the small, careful ways she managed everything herself. Each day brought new challenges, but he no longer saw them as interruptions. They had become part of his purpose, and he felt a responsibility growing stronger with every visit. As he approached, he noticed the land was unusually quiet. Even the birds seemed still. Ayanna was outside, checking the fence lines. Her face carried a calm determination, but Daniel could see the faint worry in her eyes.
"Good morning, Daniel," she said quietly.
"We may have company today," he nodded, scanning the horizon. Sure enough, dust clouds appeared in the distance. 2 trucks approached along the dirt road, moving slowly but steadily toward the house. Daniel felt a tight knot form in his stomach. He had expected this moment, but the tension was no less real. "Stay calm," he whispered. "We can't handle this." Ayanna remained composed. She gathered some of the supplies and positioned herself near the house. Daniel dismounted, his boots crunching against the dry earth. He moved toward the fence line, ready to intercept if needed. The men in the truck stepped out, carrying clipboards and speaking in polite tones, but their confidence and subtle threats made it clear they were testing her resolve. "We've come to discuss the property," one of them said. "We think it would be easier for everyone if you considered selling." Ayanna shook her head firmly. "This land belongs to my family. It is not for sale." "You may leave now." Daniel stepped forward, his voice calm but steady. "You are not welcome here. Please leave before anyone gets hurt." The men glanced at him, weighing their options. Daniel held their gaze, unflinching. After a tense moment, they returned to their trucks and drove off. The dust cloud settled, leaving an uneasy quiet. Daniel exhaled slowly, realizing how close things had come to turning violent. Ayanna looked at him, her expression unreadable at first. Then she smiled faintly. "You have courage," she said. "Not the kind that fights, but the kind that stands firm. That is rare." Daniel felt a strange warmth, a mix of pride and relief. But he knew this was only the beginning. The men would likely return, and he could not predict what measures they might take next. He began to organize his work for the day, reinforcing fences and checking doors and gates. Every detail mattered. Over the next few days, Daniel focused on strengthening the property. He repaired broken boards, secured gates, and cleared paths that had been tampered with. He also began documenting everything carefully: photographs of damaged areas, tracks, and tire marks. He knew that if the situation escalated, having proof would be important. Ayana observed quietly as he worked, occasionally giving guidance. She showed him subtle signs in the land: broken twigs where someone had stepped, disturbed rocks indicating movement at night, and other small details that could be easy to miss. Daniel listened closely. He had always been practical, but now he realized that observation and awareness were as important as physical strength. Evenings were quieter, moments for reflection. Daniel would sit with Ayana on the porch, watching the sun set behind the hills. She told stories of her family, of her ancestors, and the traditions tied to this land. Each story deepened his understanding of why protecting this place mattered so much. He began to see the land not as property but as a living part of history. One afternoon, as Daniel worked near the barn, he noticed fresh tire tracks cutting through the sand again. Someone had returned while he and Ayana were inside. He motioned for her to stay calm and follow the trail. The tracks led toward a small side gate slightly ajar. Daniel carefully checked the area before closing the gate and reinforcing the lock. "They are trying to intimidate us," he said quietly when he returned. "They underestimate me," Ayana replied softly, her voice steady. "But now they will learn that I am not alone." Her resolve gave him strength. He realized that courage was not just about facing danger alone. It was also about standing with someone who needed protection. That evening, he suggested a small routine change. "We should check the property at night," he said, "just to make sure no one comes while we're sleeping." Ayana agreed. They spent hours walking the perimeter under the stars, listening to the quiet desert and watching for any signs of movement. It was exhausting, but it became a shared ritual. The bond between them grew stronger with each passing day. Daniel began to feel that he was not just helping her. He was part of a partnership built on trust and respect. Days turned into a week and the intruders continued to test boundaries. But Daniel and Ayana were ready. Their careful planning and constant vigilance began to discourage attempts at intimidation. They worked together, side by side, fixing fences, reinforcing gates, and documenting suspicious activity. Each action strengthened their confidence and resolve. During one of these nights, a shadow moved near the barn. Daniel immediately took position between the figure and Ayana. A young man appeared, clearly nervous. Daniel's calm voice broke the silence. "Leave now. You are not welcome here." The figure froze, then slowly backed away and disappeared into the darkness. Daniel exhaled, feeling relief mixed with tension. He realized that being prepared was crucial and that even small actions could prevent harm. The days continued with this rhythm: work, observation, preparation, and moments of quiet reflection. Daniel learned more from Ayana every day, not only about the land but also about patience, history, and strength. Her calm courage in the face of threats inspired him. He began to see his life differently. The quiet ranch work he had done alone for years now felt incomplete without the sense of purpose and connection. One afternoon, while repairing a section of fencing near the edge of the property, Daniel noticed signs that someone had tried to break in again. He found small cuts in the wire and footprints leading away. Ayana joined him quietly, inspecting the area. "They are bold," she said, "but they will not succeed as long as we are vigilant." Daniel felt a sense of determination rising within him. He had begun this journey as a passerby who stopped to help an elderly woman. Now, he was fully committed. He understood that standing beside her was no longer optional. It was necessary.
As the sun set, Daniel and Ayana sat together on the porch.
The desert stretched endlessly before them, bathed in golden light. They shared a quiet moment, reflecting on the days past and the challenges ahead. You have become part of this land, Ayana said softly, and part of my life. That is not given lightly. Daniel felt a deep sense of purpose. The work they had done together had changed him. He was no longer just a cowboy living alone. He was a protector, someone ready to face challenges to ensure that justice and respect prevailed. That night, as he rode back to his own ranch, the stars above seemed brighter, and the desert felt alive in a way he had never noticed before. He knew the road ahead would not be easy, but for the first time in years, he felt certain of his place in the world. Standing with Ayana had given him direction, courage, and a new understanding of what it meant to truly protect something that mattered. And so, each day became a test of vigilance, patience, and strength. Daniel and Ayana worked together, facing threats calmly and methodically. Their bond grew stronger, and every action, no matter how small, built the foundation for the next challenge. The land was not just her home. It had become a place where courage and loyalty were tested, and where Daniel discovered that real bravery comes not from fighting, but from choosing to stand beside someone when it matters most. Daniel woke before the first light of morning, the desert cold brushing against his face as he saddled his horse. Over the past weeks he had grown used to the rhythm of life on Ayana's land, and to the quiet determination she carried in everything she did. But today felt different. The tension in the air was heavier, as if the desert itself knew that a challenge was approaching. Daniel had learned to read the land in subtle ways: the position of the sun, the tracks in the dirt, the distant movements of wildlife, and he could feel that today would be a day that tested their patience and courage more than before. As he rode toward Ayana's property, he noticed that the wind had shifted, carrying with it the faint dust of distant vehicles. Ayana was already outside, checking fences and the perimeter of the land, her posture calm but alert. She spotted him and waved softly, her face betraying only a hint of concern. "Morning, Daniel," she said. "It looks like we may have company soon." Daniel nodded. "We will be ready." When he reached the house, he helped unload supplies from his horse and set them aside. Over the past weeks, their routine had become familiar. Daniel brought food, water, and tools. Ayana shared stories and guidance about the land, teaching him how to notice details that could be easily missed. Disturbed rocks, broken twigs, even the slight movement of branches that could signal someone passing through. Together they had become a team, each action deliberate, each movement purposeful. They worked on the fences first. Daniel replaced broken boards, reinforced the gate locks, and secured the perimeter as best he could. Ayana moved beside him, steady and precise, offering advice and reminders about the importance of small details. "The land speaks to those who listen," she said at one point. "Every mark, every footprint has meaning." As the sun rose higher, Daniel noticed tire tracks in the dirt near the outer gate. Fresh tracks. Someone had returned. He motioned for Ayana to stay close, and together they approached the area carefully. The tracks led toward a side gate, slightly ajar. Daniel knelt, examining the marks in the sand. They were deliberate. Someone had come to intimidate, but not yet to cause serious harm. "They are testing us," he whispered. "They will learn that we are not easy to scare," Ayana replied calmly. The men arrived shortly after, stepping from 2 trucks. Their polite tone and confident posture masked the intent Daniel had come to recognize. They spoke as if the land would eventually belong to them, but the Ayana stood firm. Daniel positioned himself between her and the men, his voice steady. "Leave now," he said. "You are not welcome here." The men hesitated, then slowly returned to their vehicles. Daniel watched until they disappeared behind the hills. The tension remained, but the immediate threat had passed. He knew this confrontation was only temporary. More challenges were likely. Over the following days, Daniel and Ayana prepared for further visits. They reinforced fences, repaired gates, and maintained careful observation of the land. Daniel also began taking more detailed notes and photographs. He documented tire tracks, broken boards, and any unusual signs. Every piece of evidence could be useful if the situation escalated. Ayana taught him how to move quietly across the land at night, to notice small disturbances, and to recognize patterns. Daniel learned quickly, realizing that vigilance was as important as strength. The desert, he discovered, was a place that rewarded attention to detail and calm resolve. Evenings were spent on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and orange. They shared simple meals and quiet conversations. Ayana spoke of her ancestors, of traditions passed through generations, and of the sacred meaning of the land. Daniel listened, absorbing her stories, realizing that the land was more than property. It was a living memory, a connection to history, and a symbol of resilience. One afternoon, Daniel and Ayana noticed that someone had attempted to cut through a section of fencing near the back of the property. The wire was bent, and the ground showed signs of recent activity. Daniel immediately reinforced the fence and checked nearby gates. Ayana examined the area carefully, noting small footprints that suggested the intruders had not been alone. "They are persistent," she said quietly. "But persistence does not always win against patience and care." Daniel nodded. He had begun to understand that protecting her land required more than physical effort. It required strategy, observation, and calm determination. Each action they took, no matter how small, built a foundation that could withstand future threats. That evening they prepared for a night watch. The desert was dark, the stars scattered like tiny lights across a black sky. Daniel and Ayana moved along the perimeter, alert to every sound and movement. Owls called from nearby trees, and the faint rustle of desert animals reminded them that life continued even in tension. They walked slowly, listening carefully, observing subtle shifts in the sand and shadows. Hours passed without incident, but the routine itself built confidence. Daniel noticed that he felt more aware and capable than he had in years. Ayana's calm presence guided him, and her knowledge of the land gave him tools he had never possessed. Together they formed a silent bond, rooted in trust and shared responsibility. In the following days, the intruders returned once more. This time they approached more cautiously, aware that Daniel and Ayana were prepared. The stranger spoke politely, attempting to sway her with promises of convenience and wealth. But Ayana remained firm. Daniel stood beside her, calm but unwavering, and their combined resolve discouraged any further intimidation. The men eventually retreated, leaving behind only the memory of their attempt. Through these events, Daniel noticed a change within himself. He had always been a quiet man, focused on his work and solitary life. But protecting Ayana and her land had awakened something deeper: responsibility, courage, and a sense of purpose that he had not realized he was missing. He no longer saw himself as merely an observer. He was a participant, a guardian. Ayana recognized this change as well. One evening, she placed her hand gently on his shoulder. "You have become part of this land," she said softly, "and part of my life. That is not given lightly." Daniel felt the weight of her trust and the importance of his role. He realized that his commitment had grown beyond simple assistance. He was invested in the outcome, in the protection of history, and in the well-being of someone who had come to trust him deeply. The following week, Daniel noticed subtle signs that the intruders were becoming more careful. Tire tracks were less frequent, and their visits seemed shorter. Their attempts at intimidation were no longer as bold. Daniel and Ayana continued to reinforce the land and document activity, but a sense of progress began to take root. Their vigilance and careful planning were paying off. During quiet moments, Daniel and Ayana spoke of life, family, and the lessons the land had taught them. She shared memories of her ancestors, of ceremonies that had been held in secret places on the property, and of the responsibility each generation carried. Daniel listened, realizing that the land was not just a place to defend, it was a legacy to honor. As days turned into weeks, Daniel's confidence grew alongside his bond with Ayana. He became more attuned to the land, more aware of subtle signs, and more capable of handling challenges calmly. He understood that courage was not measured by the absence of fear, but by the ability to act despite it. One evening, while repairing a section of fence near the edge of the property, Daniel noticed faint movement in the shadows. He quietly signaled to Ayana, and together they observed the intruders from a distance. The men had returned, attempting to assess the land once more. But Daniel and Ayana were prepared. Their calm, coordinated presence discouraged the intruders, and they eventually left without confrontation. Daniel exhaled, feeling a mixture of relief and resolve. He understood that protecting the land required constant attention, patience, and careful planning, but he also knew that the effort was worthwhile. Each small victory, each moment of preparation, strengthened their position and built their confidence. As the sun set that evening, Daniel and Ayana sat together on the porch, watching the sky shift from gold to deep purple. They shared a quiet meal and reflected on the days past. The desert stretched endlessly before them, a vast, silent witness to their efforts. Ayana said softly, "Not the kind that fights, but the kind that protects, that is rare and valuable." Daniel felt a deep sense of purpose. He had come to her land as a passerby, offering small assistance. Now he was fully invested in her life and the protection of her home. The quiet ranch work he had once done alone now felt incomplete without this sense of meaning and connection.
That night, as he rode back to his own ranch, Daniel looked at the stars above.
The desert seemed alive in a way he had never noticed before. He knew that challenges were not yet over, but he also knew that he had the strength, knowledge, and determination to face them. Standing beside Ayana, he had discovered a courage that was steady, enduring, and rooted in loyalty and care. And so each day became a test of vigilance, patience, and quiet strength. Daniel and Ayana continued their work, facing threats with calm and determination. Every action, no matter how small, contributed to their shared goal: protecting the land, honoring the past, and ensuring that courage and care could prevail even in the face of adversity. Daniel woke to the soft light of dawn, the desert stretching endlessly before him. Over the past weeks, he had grown accustomed to the quiet rhythm of life on Ayana's land. Yet today felt like a turning point. Every step he had taken to help, every fence he had repaired, every moment of vigilance had led to this point. The air seemed calm, almost as if the land itself was holding its breath in anticipation. He saddled his horse and rode slowly, absorbing the stillness, aware that the weeks of tension and preparation had built to something meaningful. When he arrived, Ayana was already outside, tending to her small garden and checking the fences. She looked up and gave him a calm smile, a mixture of relief and quiet pride in her eyes. "Daniel," she said softly, "we have done well, but today feels different. I think the balance may finally be shifting." He nodded, knowing exactly what she meant. Over the past days, the intruders had become more cautious. Their bold visits had lessened, and their attempts at intimidation had faded. Daniel felt a growing sense of confidence, tempered by the knowledge that vigilance was still necessary. They moved together to inspect the land, walking slowly along the fence lines, checking for any signs of disturbance. Every board, every lock, every gate had been strengthened. Daniel realized that their consistent care had made a difference. While walking, Ayana spoke about the land's history. She shared stories of her ancestors, their connection to the desert, and the traditions that had been carefully passed down through generations. Daniel listened intently. He had always respected nature, but hearing the stories directly from someone who had lived them gave the land a new meaning. It was no longer just dirt and rocks. It was a place of memory, identity, and strength. As the day passed, neighbors and friends from the surrounding area began to notice the situation. Some came to offer help, bringing supplies or simply lending their presence as support. The community's quiet attention added another layer of protection. Daniel saw that their combined vigilance made the intruders hesitant. He realized that courage was strengthened when shared, and he felt grateful for the small network of people who respected Ayana and her land. That afternoon, Daniel and Ayana prepared for another inspection of the fences. While checking a section near the barn, Daniel noticed subtle marks in the sand, footprints and tire tracks that suggested someone had attempted to access the property during the night. He motioned to Ayana to follow him quietly. Together they examined the area, noting every detail. "They are testing us one last time," he said softly.
"They are persistent, but they will learn," she replied.
Her voice was calm, yet her eyes reflected a quiet strength. Daniel felt a renewed sense of purpose. The weeks of preparation and vigilance had brought them to this point, and he knew that their efforts had built an unshakable defense. As evening approached, Daniel and Ayanna sat on the porch, watching the sky shift from gold to deep purple. The desert was alive with quiet sounds, the call of distant birds, the rustle of small animals, and the gentle whisper of wind through the sagebrush. They shared a simple meal, speaking quietly about the days past and the challenges they had faced. "You have shown courage beyond what I expected," Ayanna said softly. "Not the kind that fights, but the kind that stands firm when others falter. That is rare." Daniel felt a deep sense of fulfillment. He had come to her land as a passerby, offering small acts of help. Now he realized he was part of something much greater. Protecting Ayanna and her home had given his life new meaning, showing him that true courage was rooted in loyalty, patience, and care. In the following days, the intruders made no further appearances. It became clear that the combination of Daniel's vigilance, Ayanna's resolve, and the quiet support of the community had shifted the balance. The land was safe. Daniel helped Ayanna strengthen the final sections of fencing and ensured that all gates and doors were secure. Every corner of the property reflected their shared effort and determination. One morning, Ayanna approached Daniel with a small bundle. She handed it to him quietly, her eyes calm and sincere. "This is for you," she said. "Not gold, not wealth, but something far more important. It is a symbol of trust, respect, and courage. You have earned it." Daniel accepted it with a quiet nod, feeling the weight of her gesture. It was a small bundle of dried herbs, carefully wrapped, carrying the traditions and blessings of her ancestors. It was more than a gift. It was recognition of his unwavering support and bravery. The weeks that followed were peaceful. Daniel continued to visit, helping with daily chores and maintenance, but the constant tension had eased. He and Ayanna shared long conversations reflecting on the lessons learned and the strength found in standing together. The bond between them had grown into something akin to family, rooted in trust, respect, and shared experiences. Daniel began to notice changes in himself. He had always lived a quiet, solitary life, focused on the rhythm of ranch work. Now, he felt connected to something larger, something that required care, attention, and courage. Protecting Ayanna's land had revealed a depth within him that he had never known, a sense of purpose that went beyond routine, beyond solitude, into the realm of meaningful action. One evening, as the sun set over the hills, Daniel and Ayanna walked to a small rise overlooking the land. The desert stretched endlessly, golden in the fading light. They stood quietly, taking in the view. "You see what we have preserved," Ayanna said softly. "This land, our memories, our history, they remain safe because we chose to act, not out of fear, but out of respect and care." Daniel nodded. "I have learned more than I could have imagined," he replied. "Not just about the land, but about courage, loyalty, and what it means to protect something that matters."
They watched the sun dip below the horizon, and Daniel felt a profound sense of peace. The land was safe, Ayanna was secure, and his role in this story had transformed him.
He had discovered that true bravery was not about fighting or showing strength. It was about standing beside someone when it mattered most, even when the outcome was uncertain. Over the next few weeks, Daniel and Ayanna continued their routines, but the atmosphere had changed. The constant pressure from the intruders had lifted, replaced by quiet confidence and calm vigilance. Daniel helped maintain the property, repaired fences, and ensured the land remained secure. Each action, no matter how small, reinforced the sense of protection and care that had been built. Ayanna shared more of her wisdom, teaching Daniel the subtle lessons of the desert, the importance of observation, patience, and respect for the land. Daniel absorbed each lesson, realizing that the bond between people and place was deeper than he had ever imagined. The local community began to recognize Daniel's quiet courage. Neighbors spoke of the steadfast man who had stood beside Ayanna, protecting her and her land without seeking recognition or reward. Word of his dedication spread, and the story became an example of integrity and bravery, a reminder that even small acts of care could have powerful impact. One morning, as Daniel prepared to ride back to his own ranch, Ayana approached him with a warm smile. "You have changed, not just this land but my life," she said. "You have shown what it means to care deeply and act with courage. For that, I am grateful." Daniel felt a mixture of humility and pride. He had set out to help in small ways, but the journey had transformed him. He realized that the reward was not material. It was trust, respect, and connection. It was the knowledge that he had stood firmly when it mattered, and that his actions had preserved something precious. As he rode away, the desert stretched endlessly before him, bathed in morning light. Daniel felt a renewed sense of purpose. He had learned that true bravery is quiet, steady, and rooted in loyalty. It is not measured by strength or force, but by the willingness to stand with someone and protect what is important, even at personal risk. The story of Daniel and Ayana became one of quiet legend in the area, a tale of courage, respect, and the power of connection. Through simple acts of care, vigilance, and steadfastness, a man who had once lived quietly on the edge of the desert had become a protector, a companion, and a witness to the enduring strength of tradition and history. And so, Daniel's life was forever changed. The bravery he showed did more than protect Ayana's land. It revealed to him the value of connection, loyalty, and purpose. In standing beside her, he had discovered that the greatest rewards are not measured in wealth or recognition, but in the quiet knowledge that one's actions have preserved what is truly important and have touched the lives of others in a lasting way. The sun rose higher, casting long shadows across the desert, and Daniel rode back to his ranch with a heart full of understanding, courage, and peace. The land was safe.
Ayana was secure.
And he had learned what it meant to stand firmly, with care and respect, in a world where small acts of courage can change everything.